So as Denise mentioned, I have the honor of being engaged with Foxconn. I've been a partner to them for the last 6 months or so. I'm specifically focused on D Group. The MU Law School study came out March 5th. This was March 23rd. This is a lot closer, the total economic impact, but that's still not the whole story. When this was released by the MMAC, Tim Sheehy was quoted as saying we need to put a wider lens on this, and I agree. But I think it's a lot wider than the direct and one layer removed gross domestic product impact. I think what we need to talk about is what's possible in the region, right? Because with every industrial revolution, people had to ask what is possible. In 1712, the first patent was issued for steam engines. For the next 150 years, it changed the world. Bill Gates said a few years back now that until 1800, everybody in the world was poor. And the Industrial Revolution began to change that. Not for everybody, but it certainly began to change that for many, many people because it enabled so many things. And now, with the accelerating rate of change in technology, you'll find that these time periods begin to condense. Let's talk about Industry 2.0. 1870, that's not automobiles yet, right? That's the slaughterhouses in Chicago is how the assembly line came to be. And then the automobiles came around in the very early 1900s. Ford was actually 1913. Oldsmobile was 12 years before that, 1901. This is a picture of Fifth Avenue in Manhattan on Easter morning in 1900. What's in the red circle is the only automobile on Fifth Avenue on that morning. 13 years later, in 2013 on Easter morning, that is the only horse carriage on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan on Easter morning. Okay? Now, why did I choose this TV? It's not because of the TV of the day back in the turn of the 20th century. It's because Foxconn started by a $7,500 loan from Terrigo's parents to make that dial at the top. Just that piece of plastic to turn the dial. That's how what is today a $165 billion company started. And then the third industrial revolution came along and more change occurred in a shorter period of time, 60 years. In a 60-year period of time, the Fortune 500 in 1955 had 500 companies. In 2015, just 60 years later, only 60 of those companies continued to exist. We're still in existence. 60 years later, 7 out of 8 Fortune 500 companies had gone away. And that's a big number until you realize that today, if you ask the C-level about change in the digital economy, digital transformation, the belief is that 40% of today's Fortune 500 will cease to exist in the next 10 years because of a lack of relevancy in the digital economy. 200 of the 500 companies will go away in the next 10 years. We can either watch it happen in front of us or we can be an active part of making our future. So I want to dig in a little bit on Industry 3.0. And in order to do that, we actually have to go back to 2005 together. This could have been an H.G. Wells time machine or a DeLorean, but I went here. So I was happy when the former presenter talked about Tinder of transportation. So that opened me up for the hot tub time machine. So if you go back to 2005, and these are some images that might help you. It's the year that Aaron Rodgers was drafted, Ryan Braun was drafted, and so forth. Lance Armstrong was still a hero. Just go back to 2005 and think for 15 seconds what you were doing in 2005. What was different? Where were you working? What were you doing? How was your family life different, etc.? Just think about that. So how many of us had a BlackBerry in 2005? 13 years ago, who had a BlackBerry? How many people have an iPhone today? Okay, so imagine in 2005 that Steve Jobs is standing in front of this region holding up version 1 of the iPhone, and he says, in 2 years, in the year 2007, I'm going to release this. Apple is going to release this, and I'm going to give you a 2-year head start. I want you to start thinking about how you can participate in the iOS public cloud 4G ecosystem. Think about what apps you might build, and come talk to us because we want to partner with you to build great companies, great solutions for your existing companies as well. Of course, that never happened. In 2007, Project Purple became iPhone 1 as the veil was lifted. And it took 13 months for the App Store to be launched. Because at first, everything was going to run through web apps on Safari. And it took them a few months to figure out that we needed to do something different. So they built an SDK and built the App Store. And since then, in 9.5 years, because this is not 10 years ago yet, 220 billion downloads have occurred here. 4 times that many in the Google Play Store. Because they built an ecosystem. 220 billion downloads. And that enabled companies like these to either exist or to grow. Many of these companies didn't exist before 2007 or 2005, 13 years ago. When you look at, Facebook was around in 2004, LinkedIn was around. But LinkedIn is not worth $26 billion to Microsoft without mobile. Now, Apple would never say the iOS cloud 4G ecosystem. Doesn't make sense. They say it's the iPhone. Here's what you can do with it. It also enabled this story. These are unicorns. Everybody understands what a unicorn is? It's a company that went from 0 to $1 billion in valuation in a 10-year period of time or less. This is the map geographically. So that ecosystem furthered the narrative of the usual suspects: Silicon Valley, Austin, Boston, Seattle. Perhaps if you don't understand the ecosystem around the Church of Latter-day Saints and data analytics, Utah might surprise you, but that's a strong base there. This is the more interesting view, the temporal view. Let's talk about rate of change here. If you look at the right side of the screen, that's just the last 4 years. It's the same companies represented, many of them depending on mobile technology, many of them depending on 4G, which enables video over mobile. Many of them depending on either Android or iOS to exist. What we have is the Taiwanese Steve Jobs standing in front of us, telling us we are building an ecosystem. It is based on 8K and 5G, and recently they added AI. You may have seen last week's IPO in China, the $4.3 billion Foxconn Industrial Internet IPO. Foxconn will be a strong player in the industrial Internet of Things and the automation of factory for smart manufacturing, fitting perfectly into the curriculum that Brian and his team built and the partnership that Hira has ongoing. It is 8K and 5G is talked about at every gubernatorial signing event, but nobody knows what it is. I'm not going to spend time on AI. Let's talk about 8K and 5G. 8K is 16 times 1080p. If you have a high-def TV at home, it's 4 times the number of pixels of 4K. 5G depends on 3 things, really: capacity, the lack of latency so machines can talk to one another, and speed. But Jobs said it doesn't matter what it is, it matters what you can do with it. So let's talk about what you can do with it. With 5G, you have thousands of use cases at least. Advanced manufacturing is enabled by 5G because machines can talk to one another with less than 1 millisecond of latency. On 4G, that's 30 to 40 milliseconds of latency, and it's a little less predictable what happens in lights-out manufacturing. It also enables lights-out warehousing. These overgrown Roombas can move 1,200-pound shelves and communicate with one another to get to their destination in the warehouse without much instruction. 8K and 5G enable us to use augmented reality to engineer and design products differently than we ever imagined before. That extends to rapid prototyping and testing. 8K and 5G help us rethink the way we service existing machines in the factory and on the farm. That's augmented reality through an iPad. The form factor may very well just be goggles. 8K and 5G is our Jetsons moment. Immersive hyperconnectivity across the globe using technology of today. This is George talking to Gene. That seemed futuristic when we all watched it after the Flintstones. And today that's a really bad version of FaceTime, right? But it's getting even better. It will be more immersive and more connected, a more connected feeling as you communicate anywhere. This is augmented reality for the smart home, in a smart kitchen. We will interact with user interfaces differently than we ever have before, and we will interact with data differently than we ever have before. 8K and 5G enable things like this project, an active $800 million project called the Johnson Controls Smart Village at the NFL Hall of Fame. It's ongoing right now, under construction. This is a connected village, a connected campus. That enables 8K and 5G enables smart cities. It enables autonomous vehicles. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that, but when you have less than 1 millisecond of latency between machines, it's far safer than human beings driving. 8K changes the user experience, so you never have to threaten to turn around again with the kids in the car. You'll already be turned around. And you'll be able to watch videos of high quality in your car. Everybody with headphones on, nobody has to talk to each other, it's great. And it's not just automobiles, it's also semis. So there's lots of YouTube videos right now of this, wrong brand for beer, but Otto is owned by Uber, and autonomous semis are here already and coming faster. 8K and 5G revolutionizes, helps us rethink education. Different form factor again, that's a little dated. Whether it's children for immersive experiences as they study chemistry or lifelong learning. Again, hyperconnectivity. 8K and 5G help us rethink healthcare. As we go across the top row, you've got an educational environment in a learning hospital using augmented reality. You've got connectivity because we know treating the whole patient and offering connectivity throughout improves outcomes. Upper right-hand corner is actually a Milwaukee-based company, early stage, called EM Opti. They are using telemedicine in emergency rooms right now. It's called command center medicine. Command centers will hit law enforcement. They'll impact manufacturing environments. There's a 15-monitor command center down at the Experimental and Training Center right now. It's like walking into NASA. They have 2 lines running, that's it. But there are 3 rows of tables and chairs where role-based people sit. Supply chain management sits at the front. They've got their KPIs right in front of them. It's real-time data impacting decision-making rapidly. And so here you have 8K and 5G enabling virtual reality to reduce the number of opioids we're consuming because virtual reality can help us deal with pain management. The other side of it, it's immersive experiences. He could be in Paris right now while receiving radiation therapy and sitting still for a couple of hours. 8K and 5G help us perform brain surgery before brain surgery actually has to be performed because of VR. This is another Wisconsin company called Spalding Medical. They produce a 12-lead EKG device. It's cloud-enabled. Press one button. It's like an overgrown smoke alarm or undergrown smoke alarm. And a cardiologist does the read in Park City, Utah, or some other ski resort because he's retired or she's retired. And they have their read back within an hour. 5G helps them. 8K, lower right-hand corner, allows this type of practice, this remote diagnostics, to extend to dermatology and ophthalmology, 2 of the specialist fields where wait times are the longest, up to 6 months to see an ophthalmologist today. In 2007, Apple challenged us to think different. And when there's an opportunity like the one that Foxconn and the rest of what's going to happen because of Foxconn enters the region, our challenge over the next 10 years to maximize the impact of this is to rethink Wisconsin. So we can build an ecosystem. And we can either watch it happen in front of us, because it's not an exclusive offer, right? It's a first mover advantage that we've missed for the last 8 months. Or we can all decide to play an active role in taking on the challenges and benefiting from the results over the next 10 to 13 years. That's all I have. Thank you.